Дорогі отці, дорога зібрана тут громада і всі гості, що сьогодні тут прибули. На мене впала ця черга так несподівано. You conduct a meeting. Well, hey. Я не знаю, я не маю партитури нічого, але я мушу передати цього до наших головних бесідників і до вас всіх вас присутніх. Я покличу на отця Владію, щоб він почав це засідання. Я мушу піти трошки скорше, то вибачайте.
Христос рождається. I received a call last Wednesday from Mr. and Mrs. Chatska, and the reason we are here today is because after the conversation and after everything else, I said I would be in the area and would be willing to meet if that was desirable. Obviously, somebody felt it was desirable, so here we are. And so I think to start off with, I would simply like to go through all of the history of why we're here. As you know, in December of 2005, and again in June of 2006, there were parish meetings of St. Peter and Paul at which motions were made and passed to liquidate the parish. And I'm just going to read, this is from the Statute and Bylaws of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada. In the sample statute for parishes, it says, in the event of the need to liquidate this congregation, any remaining assets, after paying all expenses and regulatory obligations of the congregation, become the sole property of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada. So, that's number one. Number two is, this is from this past Sobor in 2005, Resolution 16. 16.1. Be it resolved that when a parish of the UOCC is dissolved, all principal realized from its closure be transferred to the UOCC Foundation for the purpose of opening a mission parish within 3 years following the dissolution in the city or general area of the dissolved parish, and that any interest incurred on principal over the 3 years must be used for missionary purposes as outlined in 16.2, and then 16.2 says, be it further resolved that either 3 years after the dissolution of a parish of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada, or if there is no reasonable hope of establishing a mission parish in its geographic area, all funds realized from the dissolution of said parish be designated missionary funds within the UOCC Foundation, which are be used to A, support outreach work in smaller parishes, B, support existing mission parishes, and C, open missions in urban centers where UOCC faithful live, but which have no UOCC parishes. So just to be very clear on it, when congregations are dissolved, and this is something that happens every now and again here and there, funds do not go to the consistory, they go into the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada Foundation, and then they may be used according to the mandate given by the Sobor. So having just read all of that, I would like to begin by saying that I certainly hope all of us who are gathered, I hope everybody in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is of the firm position that none of us is permitted to act in a way which is contrary either to the governing documents of our church or the laws of Canada. In other words, and it's the same thing. It comes down to exactly the same thing. We cannot do anything illegal, and we must work by the book whenever we have these types of issues. And, you know, with all due respect to everybody here, if anybody does not believe that, you really should leave right now, because there's really nothing to talk about. And if you all believe that, then I should leave right now, because there's nothing to talk about. We have to be very clear in saying we have to follow the laws of the land. None of us, either as members of a consistory, as trustees, as members of a parish, none of us can act in a way which contravenes the governing documents of the church, nor the laws of the land. And I hope that that's very clear. So, what happened? We had the motion in December, which was passed. We had the motion in June, which was passed. The last service had been scheduled for the 9th of July. The service happened, and within a couple of days, someone came and changed the locks on the church building. This was discovered when Father Roman had a panachida service scheduled in church on a weekday evening for a family that, you know, wanted prayers for reposed family members. And he came to church, and the family members were there, and he came to open the church, and it wouldn't open. So he went around to the side, and it wouldn't open. And then he called the parish council president, Ollie Wawrick, and she came down, and her keys wouldn't open it. And so then one of the family members said, well, you know, it looks like somebody changed the locks. And it was very embarrassing for Father and for Ollie. And they ended up going back to the family's house to have this panachida service. And then I got a call saying, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. And then later that week, I was informed that Alex Chohanyuk, Joseph Boyer, and Michael Olinik had basically taken control of the property. On July the 21st, in according to normal due process of how this works, because as I said, this isn't the first time that a congregation has been liquidated, and it probably won't be the last. As is the normal operating procedure, standard operating procedure, the Presidium of the Consistory named Ollie Wawrick, Steve Matyiashin, and Bill Hanuschak trustees. And again, I won't read chapter and verse, but it says that, you know, the trustees are named from the parish. They were on the executive, and that was done with the intention of moving forward with the disposition of the assets. At that time, there were three possibilities, because this had been discussed at the full consistory meeting in May yet, and there were three possibilities as far as the disposition of assets. Number one possibility was liquidate the congregation, but keep the property and just reopen it as another congregation. Sometimes you just need to start over. That was option number one. Option number two was liquidate the property, close the congregation, liquidate the property, but then try to open it up somewhere around here in the general area, if we could find another location. And then the third option would be just liquidate the property. It goes into the funds go into the foundation in accordance with the Sobota resolution, and we go that route. Okay. From July, August, and September, we had repeatedly requested Mr. Chohanyuk, Mr. Boyar, and Mr. Olinik that they would cooperate with the trustees, and that keys would be transferred over, that, you know, we would have the access to the building as would be normal. And these requests were met either with silence or with rebuttal. And so we come to October, where it was a proposal for amalgamation was made public, signed by Mr. Boyer, which stated that, all along, the consistory was told that we want to reopen the congregation. Well, in October, this proposal made it very clear that there was never any intention to restore the congregation to a functioning parish church, but that the property was going to be sold, a foundation was going to be started under St. Mary's Church in Surrey, that the funds from the dissolution of the parish would go into this foundation, except for money which would be paid to TUS. The foundation would be directed by 5 directors, 3 of whom would be from here. Anyway, to make a long story short, it became clear what the plan was. And at that point, we had received an inquiry from the parish council president of the Surrey Church, saying, we hear this is in the wind, whatever you would like to do, we'll cooperate, etc. When I wrote her back and explained to her the situation, then that all quieted down. Now, in the meantime, all along, we are trying to be as quiet and peaceful as possible, because no one is not in the best interest of anyone. Not the church, not the people involved, not the Ukrainian community, to have any type of public scandal. So we're trying to keep things quietly, but again, from our perspective, getting absolutely no cooperation. And so we come to December, and during this time, the process is going through for the actual transfer of the title. So, as of this morning, the papers have all been signed. The title is being registered in the name of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada. And this is where we stand. Having spoken with Mr. and Mrs. Tchatska on Wednesday, I'm not quite sure, because I said I would be willing to meet, which I certainly am, but I'm not quite sure, forgive me, why we're going to meet. So I thought I would just lay out the picture for you as far as the consistory is concerned, and then whatever you would like to say, I'd be glad to listen to it. Okay, so before you have any of your own comments, does anybody have a question for me regarding what I've spoken about, the history of all of this? Please.
Yes.
And what is your name, please?
My name is Bogdan Husik.
Okay. And are you from this congregation, or are you from another congregation?
Well, I'm from this congregation for the current time. I've also been a long-time member of the TUS branch that has financially supported this parish for the last 15 years. My question is, this is the first time that I've heard from anyone that the 3 options were available, the 3 options that you mentioned, to reestablish the parish or to sell it and buy something else. From my understanding, I'd never heard those 2 options before. And now perhaps we have a problem of a lack of good communication, because that option was never made clear to anybody that I have spoken to.
I, in my file in Winnipeg, can show you where Mr. Boyer talks to that. So we communicated.
Okay, but
I can't speak to that.
that's right. I just wanted to clear up that it was a lack of information. I'd like to perhaps give you a little bit of history of our parish.
Okay, but before you do that, I'd be happy to listen. If there are any questions to whatever I have said, and I'd rather deal with the questions first and then deal with what you would like to say.
Okay, then I have a question on one of your comments. you mentioned how we must follow the rules and regulations and follow the rules of Canada and that. Were you implying when you said that somebody has not?
Well, if I were to show up at your house, have the locks changed, and then not give you the keys when you asked for them, is that something that is normally done?
Well, ownership is not established at that point. And in all fairness, I had no idea that that was done, but I can understand why it was done, in that the Toos branch, who owns much stuff in this building, was concerned, no, I'm speaking, I didn't interrupt you, was concerned about the things that in here, and you know, that it would remain safe. And from what I understand, some things had already disappeared from the library prior to that. Is that correct, Alex? And that's why it was done. So again, a lack of understanding or misinformation or whatever. But from my understanding, I don't really believe that anybody has done anything contrary to the law or that wasn't done in anything but, you know, what they thought was in their, you know, in the best interests of the people and the history of this parish.
As far as ownership being established, the parish council, I won't quote you chapter and verse if you want me to. The parish council administers the physical holdings of the parish on behalf of the parish. And so there was a parish council in place at that time, and they were responsible for it. So that's the issue of ownership, okay?
Well, no, that's not absolutely clear.
Okay.
And now the other point was that you mentioned that the consistory appointed 3 trustees. If you check the bylaws of the church, the consistory has the right to appoint 3 trustees, and their duties are limited. Their duties are, in the point, and I'm reading right out of the Constitution, to help solve any problems within the parish, to bring order back to it. Now, I know that the question here is, well, the parish was dissolved, but the parish was not really dissolved with 100% unanimous agreement by the members at that point either. So perhaps we were a little late in getting the consistory to appoint 3 trustees to bring some understanding to this, because the appointment of the trustees by the consistory have limited jurisdiction if you check your constitution.
Again, just to go over legally the way this has always been done. This is always the way it's been done. We never had a problem with any court in Canada. So that's number one.
I asked you to read the...
No, I understand very well what you're saying, but there's no, okay, and then I could ask you the same thing, because nowhere there does it say that there must be 100% buy-in by all members of the congregation. Excuse me, please. I did my best not to interrupt you, okay? Please. It nowhere says that there has to be 100% buy-in to make a subordinate resolution, to make any kind of election for a parish, etc., nor does it say for the liquidation. So that 100% argument is specious. Okay, so that's number one. Okay. Number two is that when the congregation is liquidated, again, this all gets done in a particular manner. And one part of that is that it has always happened where the consistory, you know, eventually the congregation ceases to exist. Okay, if the congregation ceases to exist, there can't be an executive of the congregation, and that's why the trustees are named. And I mean, just to be very blunt about it, the government of British Columbia feels absolutely fine with the way things have been done. You are entitled to your opinion about it, and if you would like to challenge it, you're of course willing, you're able to do so. Okay, that's the thing. But we have to act in as proper a way as we can, and I think the only point I would make is we have done that, and the government of British Columbia feels comfortable with it.
Are you aware that they were nominated trustees of the existing congregation?
That's not an issue here.
I'm asking you a question. Were you aware?
I have the minutes of the annual general meeting of December 19th, 2005, with the slate of officers that was nominated and passed.
So, legally, the way it works, and I am fully aware that the congregations are not just the Burnaby congregation.
Burnaby?
Burnaby was originally Burnaby, U.S.
Okay, this is called on the charter. It's called New Westminster.
But those
I just want to be clear. We know what because I don't know the history. So
okay. Many times parishes forget to register with land registry all of the time, but the last elected trustees of the parish, and for everybody's clarification, with the land registry office, the trustees are the ones who legally sign the papers for any sale or purchase of it. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada was set up in a way that it was a democratic thing, but legally with land registry, it was 3 trustees that actually legally stay on the papers for it. And even though the parish was supposedly terminated at the last, in that July or whatever it was, those trustees still would legally be considered the ones that have signing authority. Now, that would be the way, and that's why it's a moot point. It's an arguable point. But aside from all of that, is it pretty obvious that there are people around who would like to, if you wish, begin a new parish in this location? And rather than selling it and paying commissions and all of that, that we look and say, what is the feeling here? We're looking for the consistory to help read the people who are here and act on behalf of what's in the best interest of all parties. So, we're not looking for an argument either. And now I'll get a bit emotional. For over 45 years, this parish has existed. It's been a very poor parish for all of its time. I remember the very first people, and Mr. Chohanyuk's parents, and a few others who started it and got it going. And it survived by the skin of its teeth for years and years and years. It always has. And they were short of money many times. And the members and friends of the parish, and not always members of the Burnaby, now New Westminster Parish, reached into their pockets and put out their own money to keep it going. I'll give you one example. Dan Matsanyuk was not a member of this parish, but he more than once took money out of his pocket, because his were a little deeper than many, to keep it going. And at meetings, it happened many times, my father, and he would just go among the people and say, we need some money. And they opened up their wallets and they put it in. Otec Jershina, Otec Debran, Otec Moroz worked really hard with the people in the parish to keep it going. It's always been a poor church mouse parish, but it fostered some wonderful people. And that's what everybody who ever got involved in it said. There's such nice people in this parish. It's never been a rich parish. It's always struggled. It's in the Lower Mainland between 2 more powerful parishes. But from my understanding and the way when people and immigrants came to Canada, that's what they did. They started when they had something, they got something going, and emotionally for me, I remember the last time I met with Otec Moroz. He said to me, well, do whatever you can to keep this little parish alive. And, that's That's what we're trying to do to keep it going. I was surprised, as was many people, when we heard that, well, the last service is going to be July the 8th or whatever. I had no idea. In fact, most of the people in the Lower Mainland had no idea how, you know, the problems that were here. They had no idea how many days a week Ollie Waverick and many of the others were still, you know, coming here trying to keep things going. And you know, I take my hat off to them and everything. But in the spirit of goodwill and what this is all about, you know, are there people who are wanting to continue with having this parish here?
In the spirit, and if I may, I know other people want to talk, so you know, I'll just, in the spirit of goodwill and what it's all about. Yeah, what is it all about? Is it about property? Is it that Wally Church wants the assets to go there? Is it that Cathedral wants the assets to go there? Is it that people, and I've heard it, so excuse me, is it that people are saying, oh, the consistory wants to get it because Father Botan wants to line his pockets, which is just absolutely false and scandalous? Or is it about up there? Is it about what's on the floor above us? That's a real good question. Okay, that's a real good question. You indicated at the beginning that this was, you know, locks were changed not because of what was up there, but because of that. Because Toos had property which they were worried about. Well, if that's what it's about, you know, I think we can say, okay, let's, Toos, take whatever you want, and now let's talk, because what's it about? I think that's exactly the point that you raised that is important for us to know.
I think that's an unfair statement.
No, please listen to me. Please listen. My point is, I'm using that as an example. I'm not saying that's it, but I'm saying, what is it about? I think that's exactly, you're right there. What is it about?
Dichotomizing is not a fair way to look at that.
Pardon me?
Cutting it into two opposing things is wrong. Let me tell you something.
Okay, excuse me.
Separating and saying they didn't care about the church, but they cared about...
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. I said if Toos would like that, let them take it out. I never said Toos didn't care about the church. Please do not put words in my mouth.
No, you did.
Okay.
I'd like to point out a few things, and I believe Father Margaret would have neglected to comment on a few items, and maybe you have forgotten. When we realized problems here, we had a meeting with, if I can come to the front, so my limited understanding of the church is, and I believe there was a letter written a few days before the last war, that the Metropolitan has the final say as far as anything regarding the church. When I found out that this church was in trouble, and I heard the history of how difficult it has been for people to maintain it due to the aging population, we contacted the Metropolitan. We explained the situation. I won't go into the procedures of the meetings that were held because they are legal issues. But in good faith, he said to us he did not want this church to close. He gave us 1 year to put it on its feet. We said we do not have the money to have a full-time priest and permission to have part-time services when required in this 1 year. He gave us his blessing. I have every word written down, so there is nothing that's not clear. We did this on the basis that the Metropolitan has the final say for our spiritual needs in Canada. The other thing happened is he told us to hold an executive meeting, which we did, and the members that were elected were those from 2005. Word has come to us through other sources that you say is scandalous, so we're not going to do anything behind anybody's back. Shomiya volachuhi. That means we are renegades for trying to save the church, right? I do not regard myself as a volachuha. I find that personally very upsetting as a Christian person who's trying to fight for the souls of this church, not for the money, right? It's not a question of $1.5–2 million. I'll go into that in a moment. We then get a letter from Father Hladio saying that we have up to 1st of February to, and this is what you neglected to read out today, Father, so that's why we have a lot of this confusion, that we have up to 1st of February. No other church has been given these conditions. We please, I'm saying this. We had to get 40 members. We have to submit a business plan, plus. I am pleased to report to you, Father Hladio, that we have now 45 signed members that you all know. They're not renegades, they're not volochushis, they are not people here to try to get money out of this church. These are educated, hard-working, former members of this church with children. We have now, there are 45, 9 more today as a result of us having this malunka to renew this church. Plus 12 children, plus a business plan. We have recognised everything that you have imposed on us. And as far as Mr. Boyard, he got so confused with all these contradictory letters. The bishop telling us, the metropolitan telling us with his blessing to go on. Then we get a letter with these conditions. He is looking after his poor wife, who was not allowed to present the enduring power of attorney at that last meeting, and if you check with your legal people, that overrides any church proxy. So there were irregularities. He was very upset about it. He's looking after his wife, and whatever he did not do that with the knowledge of anybody in this congregation, nor with the approval. That was never the intent of amalgamation. People want this church for spiritual needs. When you see the quality of the people, these are the people that are hardworking. And when we didn't have access to this hall till Friday, I might add, for this malunka, we had no access here to this hall, right? Anyway, you would not believe, and we have everything on video, so you do not misunderstand us, because this is very clear. We have to communicate, not behind people's backs, calling them renegades or this. You have to get to know us because you are responsible for us, and so forth. But not only that, on Friday night, 7 o'clock, there were former members who came here. They worked their hearts out with pleasure. They went home after working here till 2 in the morning to set everything up. They baked, they brought food. People willingly were ringing me up. Can we do something? We had 84 people, 9 couldn't come because of the icy weather. The people, as soon as they went home, at 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, they rang Ukraine. They rang their relatives in Canada. And I'm telling, I can give you names, I can give you all these details, that I'm not making a thing up, to say, at last, we are at home. People were crying here. They were emotional. It was a religious malunka. It wasn't la-di-da, dressed up or anything. People, we had icons there, we had all the customs, traditions. We started off with prayers, and I made a speech, a spiritual speech, right? About we don't want it just for the malunkas, like poor Ollie. She said, yes, you'll get people coming for malunkas and this and that. She said, but in the end, she was here all night trying to save this church. And I made it clear. Then we had the meeting on Sunday, and we made it very clear before we went on with the meeting that it wasn't going to end up like people like Ollie and all the other people that nearly killed themselves to keep this church. And everybody agreed. They want to pay their membership, etc., etc. And this is the situation we're dealing with. And why we are here today is we do not want to have scandal, as you put it. We do not want, on both sides, to go through legal litigation, because both sides feel we have the right to do it, and that comes out. And once you get it out in the community, you're not just going to close down New West, you are going to close down Mission, Chilliwack, because people will have enough of this. We need spiritual support, and we want the consistory not to talk down to us. We are equal in front of God, and whatever anybody does is God sees us, and we want spiritualness in here. And we had it here at the Malunka. And you can ask the people that were here. I'm not just telling you that, and that's why we initiated, because you gave us instructions to do all these things, and we have fulfilled your instructions, and now you tell me it's already signed, and yet in your letter you have said 1st of February. And because nothing was happening, we felt we had to at least honour all the people that worked so hard previously. They have never been honoured. The way it was closed, there was acrimony. People didn't talk to each other. I mean, I don't want her not to talk to Miss Valverick. I never knew the lady. I just knew that she put in so much of her heart and soul, many others here. And we do not want the consistory to divide our community. Okay? If whatever's going to happen legally or otherwise, I don't want to come and see somebody and have bad feelings, or them to have bad feelings to me, and nor do I want the clergy to refer to us as Wolochuki or renegades. I find that very hurtful. Thank you.
Okay. To reply to that, first of all, I can never in my life remember referring to you as a renegade. So if somebody else did...
Not personally, collectively. And it happened. I don't want to go into it.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Anyway, to deal with what you talked about. Again, just to quote from the statute, the consistory, in the spirit of unity and indivisibility of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada, and notwithstanding the provisions of this statute and bylaws, the sole ruling and executive body of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada in all its temporal and spiritual matters, and I underline there, temporal, in all its temporal and spiritual matters, is the consistory, headed by the primate as, quote, body in council, unquote, which means, now, you are correct in stating that the Metropolitan has final authority in all purely spiritual matters, but in the temporal matters, it is not the Metropolitan that signs off for the church. It's me and Father Krauchenko as the secretary, the chair.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Please?
It is the trustees of the parish.
No, excuse me, just to be clear, for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada, I'm not talking about a parish. I'm talking about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada as a temporal entity. Whenever we receive something from the government, I sign, and Father Krauchenko as the chair and secretary of the Presidium, which is the executive body of the consistory.
And each congregation is locally owned by the congregation.
It is not locally owned.
It is locally owned by the congregation in the names of the three trustees.
Okay, okay. Let's just. I'd like to deal with what Mrs. Chatska talked about first. So please try not to interrupt again until I get to the end of this. So, the Metropolitan and the consistory. The consistory acts in council, which means that whenever it comes to matters of temporal affairs, again, I'll quote because it's a good quote. In the spirit of unity and indivisibility, that there would not be, I'll deal with this and I'll come to you, that there would not be a spear, any type of a division between the Metropolitan, the ruling bishop, and the elected consistory of the clergy and of the faithful. When it comes to spiritual issues, purely spiritual issues, the Metropolitan does have the final authority. And so that's why it says in council there. So in all temporal affairs, we cannot have a situation where either the consistory says this and the Metropolitan says that, or the Metropolitan says that and the consistory says this. So when you say that you spoke with the Metropolitan, I don't have any problems believing you. And I believe that you wrote everything down. And I believe, thank you, it's nice that we know that now. The issue really is that what is said by the Metropolitan regarding any temporal affairs really doesn't have any force. I mean, and it's different levels. I mean, there's a level which has absolutely no bearing on any type of temporal affairs at all, other than to say, that's nice, you should do that and all. And then there are levels which have more and more bearing. So again, something said like that, I'm not really willing to comment on, because I wasn't there, I didn't hear it. Like you said, Father was there, Father, okay, that's fine, that's good. But when we talk about the actual responsibilities, well, we've got to deal with that, again, in the proper manner, and that's all we're trying to do. So I'm going to start there. When you talk about access to the hall, that you didn't have access, and as I mentioned to you on the phone, I found it very odd that, since July 10th or 11th, neither the executive, the trustees, the consistory, none of us have had access, nor have we been consulted about anything. I know people have entered the church, but, I couldn't invite anybody in, and so when you called, I found it very odd to get that call. I was very pleased that you called, as I mentioned to you, but I found it very odd. And so that whole issue of having access to the church, I don't think that's something you can, lay at our feet, because, we didn't have the keys, just very simple thing. I know that it's Mr. Hudzik, right? Hudzik, Mr. Hudzik. Okay, Mr. Hudzik, obviously, he's mentioned that he's not been a part of this whole thing. He was surprised when he found out there was going to be a last service and everything else. I know the two of you belong to the, to the cathedral for many, many years and all of this, which is fine. But one thing that did happen in September of 2005, when we had the meeting here, we had a long discussion about how to make this thing work. And at one point, having listened to what people were saying, I said, okay, so tell me, is there a need for a Ukrainian Orthodox Church in New Westminster? And everybody said, no. Nobody lives in New Westminster. Some parishioners are from there, and some are from there, and this and that. So there's a question here, and again, I'm not saying anything other than to raise the point of resource management. We have human resources, we have physical resources that have to be managed for the greater good. And so when you talk about, the emotional appeals to the history and all of that, yes, that's true. And again, with all due respect to Mr. Hudzik, because it's a good thing to mention, we should keep this in mind. The history of the parish. Well, I was thinking when he was talking, this is the history of every parish we have in Canada. That's exactly what it's like. And that's why it's such a difficult thing, because people have strong emotional, sentimental ties. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But we must, put it all into a context. And the context is we have a limited amount of resources. We have, a particular character. And I think that's come out too, so I'd like to thank him for mentioning that. A particular character to every congregation which has to be respected. And then, to my final point regarding what Alexandra talked about, and I think this is something that must be made very clear, and if there's any questions, please ask me so that we're clear about it. You talk about, I just, again, want to be very clear about this. You tell us that the papers are signed, you've given us till February, tell us that the papers have been signed. Don't mix those two things, because the example I would give to you is Bradford, Ontario. Bradford, Ontario fell into the same type of a situation which this parish was in, where you could only, you could get 13 people out for an annual general meeting talking about the liquidation of the parish, 13 members, 13 dues-paying members, that's all that, voting members, that's all that was here last December, okay? Well, honestly, we're all intelligent people here. Try to run any church anywhere on 13 members. Unfortunately, most of our people do not donate $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 a year to the church. So you need money to do it. That's just a fact of life. You're going to go to the grocery store, you're going to pay money. You're going to heat a church, you're going to pay money. So Bradford, Ontario in 1996 reached the same point, more or less. Different people, different situation, but the same general problem. The ownership of the property was transferred to the consistory. Okay? There was nobody there who could look after it, basically. The ownership was transferred to the consistory. Over the past, and they have had services there off and on since then. The decision was not made to sell it, but it was and is the property of the consistory, legally on the books. The title is held by the consistory. Over the past 5 years, the cathedral in Toronto has taken the parish under its wing. They've been sending a priest up. Now it's up to twice a month. They have 2 priests there. 1 priest goes out twice a month. They're having, not great success, but good success in renewing that whole parish, because in that area north of Toronto, if you know anything about Toronto, it's growing north, because you can't grow south, and they're having many of the newer immigrants who are living in that area because it's cheaper to live. And that we have a good priest there who's prihortaja do sebe, and so this past November, they actually elected an executive. And it looks like it's moving towards that point where it's going to be a real parish again. They have sent us a letter asking us to recognize, you know, them as the executive of the parish, and to return the title to them. So that's a success story. So don't think, and this would be my point, don't think that because the title of property is held by the consistory, that it's a done deal that it's just going to get sold. That's the only point I would like to make there. Okay, this woman has had her hand up for a while, so let's just go there.
My name is Diana Krumchuk, and
Yes.
If the cathedral accepts me, I signed a check to pay my membership last week. And I will go into some of my reasons for that when I speak to you. I want to say that before I start my remarks, I did find some of your remarks facile, and I'll tell you why. Because TUS did pay for that equipment in the kitchen. It's not only the guitars. And as a person involved in fundraising for many years, I know the pain of that venture. And I'm not sure that kind of pain is always shared by other administrative folk, be they at the consistory or anywhere else. What I am struck by, and again, I want to tell you honestly, that I had warned this group, judging from your communications, that you had a strong leaning toward sticking to the letter of the law. And I had total expectations that your posture would be as it is today. What I am surprised about is that if you are so convinced that this parish would sink, why not let them try? Why not let them try? What's the harm in it? When you say that Toronto is expanding, then you haven't informed yourself on the demographics of Burnaby and New Westminster. The highest number of immigrants in the Lower Mainland are in Burnaby, mostly in Burnaby and New Westminster. So this is the closest parish for them. It was the will of these people who started this movement to provide a parish for these people. Now, I was a number 5 on all this, and I didn't sign myself up as a member. So, I mean, you could set me down, I guess, if you cared to, but I'm about probably the most neutral person in this crowd. I think that if you really have some interest in the spiritual life of Ukrainian Orthodox people, you would take it upon yourself to meet with the bishop and say, let's give them a chance. The bishop seems to agree to it. What's the problem here? If Toronto is growing north, we are in a worse condition. We have only this landmass, you know, coming from Vancouver here. We are going to be in the same problem. And if immigration opens up anymore from Ukraine, we will have more immigrants. My feeling is, because, you know, I'm not so passionate as other folks about this. I know the problems of fundraising. And I am certainly not up for pierogi making. I would like to rent it out for different groups, maybe, whatever. But I do really understand the problems of fundraising. This is nothing new to many of us who have worked in organizations. But I am surprised. I was expecting it, but I'm surprised the extent to which you are leaning on the letter of the law. And I'd like somehow for us to get a grip on that, and maybe you can help us.
Okay. Thank you. Those are good comments. Well, she's due to a response just like everyone else. Her
Okay.
comments are valid. And just before I begin, just one little thing. I mean, you said, quote, when you say that Toronto is expanding, you haven't informed yourself about the situation. Well, those two things don't go together. You don't know that because I know that Toronto is expanding that I might not know.
But it's a fact here.
I know, but
I mean, I'm a Rotarian, and I know the demographics of the area.
Ma'am, you're right. You're right, I agree with you. But I just want to point out the fact, you said because I'm doing that, I don't know about this.
Well, that's
I
neither here nor
have
there.
studied
Yeah.
this too.
Okay.
No, it is here, there. You
Well,
were,
I don't think so. I think it's a diddly point.
okay, well, you made it then.
Okay.
Anyway, the issue
On
here
yours, on
about
your
the
part.
spiritual growth, again, I can assure you, okay, I'll tell it to you in two ways. Again, there's the temporal and there's the spiritual, and that's, you know, that's what you have in any church group, right? From a temporal standpoint, believe me, we have to stand by the letter of the law. Because, no, ma'am, excuse me,
Nobody here seems to think that.
ma'am, excuse me, we as a board, if you're a Rotarian, you should know, as a board, the consistory bears legal responsibility, right? Any board of directors does, to a greater or lesser degree. We have to do things correctly, because we then could be liable. I could be liable not only as a director, because the consistory is literally the board of directors of the UOCC, if you want to put it in those terms. Okay, it's like a corporate board. And we cannot do something which would either put us or put any of our employees or anybody else in a position of legal liability. So when you talk about letters of the law, I do not believe that that's really an issue. I believe we all have to be that way. But when you talk about the spiritual end of things, I can assure you with my whole heart, and it's in the minutes of the consistory meeting from May, that we don't want to close churches. We want to be opening churches. And if all of this, you know, unfortunate misunderstanding ends up with having a viable church again in New Westminster, I mean, glory to God. Everybody would jump up and down and sing hallelujah. I guarantee you of that. Okay?
I cannot see why you can connect this leaning on the law, and I am telling you that I was 100% convinced that these people should have had legal aid before they spoke with you, because I don't believe that as church leaders, this leaning on the law should carry any. I believe that you, if you wish to, could get together with your fellow priests and the bishop and say, they've signed up 45 members, we've thrown all kinds of sand in their face, and they've met the conditions.
Ma'am, Alexandra mentions this today, and you know, again, with all due respect to everybody, I have been trying to have some type of a communication, and again, I have been stymied. This is the first I hear, and she's not the one who got the letter. As I said earlier, I want to thank both of them publicly that they called me, because at least that was something. And I did something which I don't know if I should have done or I shouldn't have done, but I read them that letter that was sent, and they've done something with it. This is a positive thing, okay? This is a positive thing.
What I would have expected is that we from the cathedral might have heard of these dire conditions here earlier.
Okay.
And that you came to the cathedral and
Okay.
said, look, your brothers and sisters are in trouble there. Why don't you people start looking in there? I mean, when they contacted me, I wasn't against helping here, and it's the same with many other people. But it seems that a little bit cloak and dagger.
Excuse me for that. It's not that there's any intention to be that way. It's just, again, you know, how far do we throw out the net? Because, again, Mr. Woodard, the Tyatskas, you, all the people that have talked, you're from the cathedral. And again, with due respect.
No, I'm not, sir.
You're not? I understood that you weren't part of this congregation. You told me you knew nothing about it. Okay, anyway,
Can I just
forgive
talk
me.
about the legal aspects? This is very,
Yes.
very serious, and you should be aware of it, or the consistory,
Mhm.
because there's legal ramifications with this issue. Who authorised the phone to be cut off? Was it the consistory telling the newly appointed trustees? Because if that is the case, this has very serious legal implications. No one was informed. Do you know that the phone is connected to the fire and alarm and burglary? There could have been a loss of this church, which maybe the developer would like it, then it's a clear land. But it's not just the church and whatever that's burned. There could have been deaths or injuries. Who would then be responsible? Would be Ollie as an appointed trustee, and Mr. Mathiashin and Hanushchak? Would it then go back to the original trustee, or does it go back to the consistory? As you said, you are now in charge of all the legal things. It is not being handled correctly. I've had a lot of legal advice and experience. I know the issues. We do not want to go to court. There are a lot of irregularities, and on both sides, and if this comes out, like other churches have, you will get a domino effect. It'll be and I guarantee that. And the priests are dependent on the parishioners. If you don't have parishioners, we don't need priests. I'm sorry. You have to address those legal issues. I want an answer now. Who cut off the phone? Who had the authority and who gave the authority to cut off the phone? We had a Malanka here. There were people here. People walk on the footpaths out here publicly, not parishioners, outside people. Who had the authority to cut off the phone? Mr. Mathiashin cut it off. Somebody must have told him. I want to know. Because I was responsible, and my husband, for this Malanka. I don't think you understand where we're going with all of this. This is not just affecting US Parish, it affects all parishes in BC. And I want a reply today, who gave the authority for Mr. Mathiashin, because we have an insurance policy. That would have been null and void. Would the consistory pick up the tab at that point for deaths or injury or loss of property? We are very serious now. You're not dealing with people now that don't know their rights or the rules. So I want to make that very clear for you to take back to the Presidium. We are not dealing with people that can be bamboozled like that letter. That has gone right across Canada. The parishes need 40 people now. You'll have to close half the churches, I should add, if you're putting that discriminatory condition on our parish. And who's to benefit by the sale? And then we already have the people signed up that are hard-working former members that want to continue because they didn't understand what was going on. So now we have to sell, commissions paid. Where are we going to get the land to save these souls? I am here not for the building. I am here for a home for my spirituality. I don't know what the plans are with parishes or where they're heading, but I'm just telling you, if we have to sell it, and I don't see why. You've laid out the conditions. You signed the letter. We have met those conditions. So where is your word in this? There it is. There's a letter there that you signed, putting all these conditions. We have worked very, very hard, and you should not have written that if you didn't mean it, because we have put in a lot of effort. A lot of effort. We have regenerated this parish with new members. They did not know of this church existing here because nothing has happened since July. I don't need this. I don't have children or grandchildren. I'm fighting for the church.
Had no intention, or his feeling was there's no way this parish is going to continue. Now, how many of you were at that meeting? Who was there? Just some of you. Am I right or wrong? Was it pretty clear that,
yes,
that he was saying, no, this is going to close?
Yes.
Now, at that meeting, we have these two things. We're working on them. Otec Blajouk was able to attend the meeting. We started the meeting with a prayer that Otec Blajouk led. Can you explain to me why we wouldn't be upset when we're trying to follow what we're being asked to do? Otec Blajouk leads a prayer, and he was reprimanded for doing it. How are we supposed to believe that we are being fairly dealt with, sir?
And Father Blajouk, he didn't come to the meeting to be at the meeting. Father Moroz just passed away. Father Moroz was a parish priest here. And Father Blajouk came, because we had that meeting, to honor Father Moroz. We had video showing the Služba Božja, the Father Moroz. When that was concluded, he went to the back and sat down and had his tea and coffee. And he has subsequently, he's got into a stress mode. His health has been affected because he was told by the consistory in writing, I'm sorry, you have to deal with it because we're dealing with psychological issues here now. It's gone beyond just being upset. Father Blažuk, an honest, hard-working, loyal priest who has done so much in this country, at this old age, who has recently buried his beloved wife, who came to say a prayer for his fellow priest, to be told that he'll have his collar removed if he continues to have any dealings with us renegades. Another priest, I'm told, this has all gone across Canada. You can't keep these things here. That another priest, this is all before my time. I don't know these individuals, so I'm not taking this personally. But another priest at the New West Parish paid for his studies at the seminary, who supported this in verbally to keep this church going, was told he better watch it. And this is how the clergy behaves? I'm ashamed. I am honestly ashamed, because if that's the way we're going, I don't know what your agenda is, and you better start bringing it out in the open, because this has gone right across Canada. The priests are terrified. They have to bow now to whatever, because they will get a bad parish. Is that how the clergy? And they're trying to be an example to us, poor sinners and renegades? I am ashamed when I hear these things. I see this poor Father Blažuk. He's now terrified, traumatized. Do you know, if you're that age and somebody will do that to you when you have devoted your life, we don't even respect our elders in the clergy. So what example are you giving us? What example? I'm terribly ashamed.
Mike, you have your hand up quite a bit.
The question is the title. Now, the title was changed. Was that voted in by the members, or were the members at all aware of this? That the consistory now is the owner of the church, right? You said that the title was just transferred. Was that voted in by the members of this church, or by who?
The congregation at a general meeting in December, and again at a general meeting of June, voted to be dissolved. And so there are, technically speaking, no members.
Okay, the thing is, I was a member of this church for quite a while, in the executive as well. So what happened in the last between 2 and 3 years? The consistory, in other words, you should have been more involved in it. And I would say that what we have been doing today to this point is working on what our hurts are. I would move that we go from that point and you explain exactly what position this group has. Are you going to let us go forward and have a church, or what is the position of this group as far as you're concerned? And then we go on. If we are to hold up, then we have no reason to remain here. If we're going to continue, give us support. And could you explain to us exactly what position this church is in?
Is that a motion?
I would make a motion.
I don't know.
It's not a motion. It's not a meeting. It's not a meeting. It's not a motion.
Yeah, but I would suggest that we get that exactly where we stand and where do we go from here. We shouldn't work on what has happened, because we can't do anything about it. But we can do what is ahead of us, and this is what we should be doing now. and you are in a position to give us guidance. The other thing
say something.
what happened in the last 3 years? It was that happened was actually manipulated. It wasn't from the membership as a whole. It was manipulated, and just a few people were able to do this. And what surprises me is that the title has been transferred without the members knowing about it or having any say in it. But because of this title being transferred, what is our position now? Please explain.
You'd like to answer that first?
As I mentioned earlier, the transfer of title means that the title is held in the name of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Canada, as opposed to being held by St. Peter and Paul, Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Westminster. Okay, that's what that means. Alexandra's very emotional statement.
Oh, please.
It was. It was. I'm not saying.
Next
No.
you'll sound menopausal. Okay,
No,
let's not
please,
just
please.
put in those words. I find it offensive. Please go
Okay,
on.
well, if you find it offensive, then
Don't need-
please forgive me. It was not meant to be. Okay? But she mentions how these, how do you say, these conditions have been imposed and that we've met them. Well, I mean, that's very good, except I've not been informed. So I can't, you know, it's
You had till
unfair.
1st of February to give the
Excuse
answer.
me.
No, I'm replying to your letter.
Am I allowed to speak, or?
Well, if there is a
Well,
very...
I'd like to respond to this because I mean, the facts are the facts.
Respond to Mike's question.
Yeah.
there.
I have not been informed of any of this. This is the first reply I've had. The letter that was sent was, I believe, sent above the signature of both myself and the Metropolitan. It was discussed very specifically at the consistory meeting, or at the Presidium meeting, okay? And it was obviously presented to the consistory because all of our correspondence is presented to the consistory. So, this is the first I hear about this. So this is a good thing. I would come back to what I had mentioned earlier about the situation in Bradford, Ontario, in that the actual holding of the title of the property is not directly related to the existence or the dissolution of a congregation who uses that property. So I think you made a very good point in saying that what has been in the past is in the past, but we're here to see what we can do in the future. And I think your point was very well made, and it's very apropos. But in order for that to happen, in order for anything positive to happen, there is going to have to be some type of cooperation. And my feeling right now is that there's a great amount here of ill will and animosity, and that's what gives me pause to think about what the real possibilities might be. But I thank you for that observation.
The thing is, again, we're discussing and exactly where do we stand.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah, okay. If the Presidium were to receive a report, and I believe that the letter was addressed to Mr. Boyar, Mr. Chohanyuk, Mr. Olinik, and I think Mrs. Chohanyuk, because they're the ones who had informed us of what had been going on, and we had had, honestly, no other contact from anybody else until last Wednesday when Mr. and Mrs. Chaska called. If we were to be informed that this was in fact happening, we would react positively to it, because as I mentioned, I certainly don't want to be the one And nobody on the Presidium nor on the consistory wants to be the one to have to close a parish. We want to have, at the end, in 2010, we would like to be able to go to the Sabor and say, we came in 5 years ago with 60 parishes, and now we have 61. Not to go in and say, 5 years ago we had 60, and now we have 55. You know what I mean? So any positive movement regarding, and it doesn't matter if it's this congregation or any other congregation, any positive movement towards either the reestablishment or the strengthening of extant congregations would be viewed very positively.
Well then, that still doesn't answer. What do we do now? Do we keep on organizing, or do we just wait for you to decide on what we're going to do?
You see, none of us can act when we have an absence of information. We need to have information in order to act. And
Simply acted in changing the ownership of the property.
Nobody's informed.
Let me say something, please.
Mr. Chanska wanted to speak for a long time now, okay?
Thank you. I'd like to clarify a little, please.
If you stand up, it will speak
I'd
louder.
like to clarify. You're going according to the law, and I wish to speak according to the law. I don't want to say contrary. If there's anything contrary to say, you could correct me, please. When we had the meeting on June the 4th, okay, the meeting was held and it was done illegally. The reason why it was done illegally, not all members were allowed to vote. The people that had the right to vote. First, there were people here that were new immigrants and they were granted, a status of a member of this church. They were not allowed to vote.
excuse me, just for clarification, when you say they were granted the status of a member, what does that mean?
They were approved by the church previously in 2005 as members of the church. Mr. Bouillard's wife, that had an enduring power of attorney, was refused, under the law, to vote. Therefore, that meeting was completely illegal and therefore is null and void. So therefore, whatever it transpired from there on is not legal, according to the Constitution. Everybody has the right. If you exclude those people to vote, you don't have a really true meeting. Furthermore, the meeting was so confusingly the way it was done, the way the people voted, that later on we explained to the bishop that he had letters, we had letters that people said we didn't know which way to vote. We wanted the church to exist, and they voted the church to not exist because it was done ambiguously. So therefore, we're asking you to reconsider this and just move backwards, and let's continue with the church amiably, not have fights. We're not going to get anywhere this way. We just want to go forward with all the people that have signed up. You have over 50 people now.
We have till September.
Why do we, and the bishop, when we met with the bishop, we have all the particulars. The bishop says, go forward. I don't want you to close the church. And since that it was done illegally, so you could say it was null and void, you can continue as you were. Why go through the procedure of trying to, and I wrote a letter to the bishop about that it was done illegally. That's all I have to say.
My understanding is, and again, with all due respect to everybody, my understanding is, and this meeting has confirmed it, okay, that there's been an abysmal lack of communication. And again, I can only deal with who I can deal with. I dealt with our consistory trustees. I dealt with those people who wrote to me, specifically Mr. Boyar, Chohanyuk, Mrs. Chohanyuk, and Mr. Olina. That's all I could do because I know that you are from the cathedral.
Okay? I'm a member of this church now.
I know, you told me on Wednesday, but I'm saying I know you as a member from the cathedral. you know, Mr. Hudzik has admitted that he hasn't been around here at all, so, you know, he hasn't been,
I beg
I've
your
seen
pardon,
you.
You didn't
sir.
say that.
I said I've been an active member of the TUS branch here, who has for the last 10 to 15 years
Yes.
been the reason why this church has
Yes.
been able to continue.
Yes, sir, but you also mentioned that you were very surprised when you heard there was going to be a last service, so that
A lot of
means,
people were surprised
Yeah.
in the
Well-
mainland, lower mainland.
okay, be that as it may, I know we have had in the past, when we've had meetings, we've had people not of this congregation who've been taking part and been driving things. I'm not saying for good or for bad, it's just a fact. And again, today we have 3 people speak, one of whom I know to be a long-term member who's worked here and been on the executive and things like that. The thing that is concerning, and again, we have to be very honest about it, the thing that is concerning me is that, again, it's all about what's upstairs. That's what this is all about. It's about having church services and things like that. I think it's a good thing that, you know, you wanted to have a Malanka. Having heard, well, anyway, it would be interesting to get a request, and this is what I was waiting for this past fall, because it was indicated in one piece of correspondence that we had that they wanted to have church services. But that's the last I heard about it. Now, if I just continue. Sorry. Listen, we all understand that any solution has to be sustainable. It can't be, you know, we're going to gather 50 or 100 people or whatever. We're going to have a couple of services. The emotion dies off. People stop coming to church, and a year later we're in the same boat. That's not in anybody's best interest. You know, it has to be a sustainable solution.
We don't know the future.
I know we don't know the future,
But the bishop gave us authority till September, and my comments are the bishop is in charge of temporal purposes. The metropolitan is in charge of our duhovnish. If we don't have a house, we don't have duhovnish. He gave authority, which I believe would overrule yours, to give it till September. 1 year, he said. 1 year. Who can we trust then? We can't trust the metropolitan. And he is controlled by the administrative staff. I'm sorry. This church you will not have an Orthodox church, not a Ukrainian one anyway in Canada, the way things are going. We have been taught that the bishop, the metropolitan, is our spiritual head. He gave us permission till September. 1 year. That's all we are asking for. We're not asking beyond that to prove that we can do it. And I don't see the reason, this hurriedness to grab the mayato.
She wanted to speak for a long time.
Yuba Cridge, a lot of people know me here. I would like to point out a few things here on. First, you gave the Ramada here till February the 1st to get, as you signed the letter. I would like to point out to you legally, with you changing the title before February the 1st, should it go to court, you'd lose on technicalities at your expense. If it should go to court, you would lose. Number 2, I'd like to point out that the people here want this church. Why is it that you want to take the church away from these hard-working people who have worked here for years? Not only have they worked here, they financially supported it. Plus, TUS has also supported this church to keep it going financially. My question to you is, what I feel right now, what's happening, that you believe in 2 gods, God and Mammon. That's all I've got to say.
You're a member where?
I'm a new member of this church.
Okay, but you have not been a member up until this past 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Just, what, a month?
Okay, just so that we're clear about that.
Tesla, you've alluded twice to the fact that a decision has to be made as to whether it's viable for this parish to continue. And I'm sort of reading in the back of your mind, or in the back of my mind, that what you mean is that it is the consistory's decision as to whether that is viable and should continue. And if that is what you are trying to say, then, sir, you don't understand or know the history of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada was purposely set up as a democratically run organization, but a religious one. And the decision as to whether a church or a parish should continue here is not the choice of the consistory, it is the choice of the people in the congregation. And I realize somebody just mentioned to me that your history in our church is recent. So, you know, when you were saying that, the viability of having this church, I'm sorry, I cannot, having lived my whole life within the Orthodox Church and family, I cannot accept the decision that whether or not a church continues to exist here in New Westminster is the decision of the consistory. That is against the whole thing of Atez Sauchuk and all the early pioneer ministers in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada. And I'm not sure whether you were aware of that.
You read Senator Yuzik's book, correct? That's the primary text on the history of the UOCC from the beginning. You have to have read that to know anything about it. Of course, I've read that book a couple of times. I've spoken with older priests. No, you're saying that I don't know the history. I just want to assure you, sir,
well, no, but,
I do know the history.
Well, then
and excuse me, please. You talk. Let me talk. Okay. I do know the history very well. I thank you for that observation. Likewise, you know, given your comments, I almost want to ask, well, when is democracy not democracy? Because, again, it wasn't, you know, the consistory didn't move in with guns a-blazing saying, you guys got to get out of town or else. I've got motions and minutes from 2 parish meetings.
But they're illegal.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Last December there was one, and this past June there was another. But there were votes taken. That's democracy. So I just want to be
done.
Sir, please excuse me. Okay, listen. Okay, listen. I'll tell you what. I have to leave at 2 o'clock because I have a 4 o'clock plane to Victoria. If I'm interrupted one more time, out of line, I'm just going to get up and walk. Okay? Because there's no use. There's no use if we're going to yell at each other. There's no use. Better just say "Daj Bože zdrowie" and like that. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? The history, okay, the history of the church, the democracy, and, okay, so the parish, and so that's the point I wanted just to make, just to be clear, is that the reason I am here is not because of something that was initiated by the consistory. I am here because of something that was initiated here in this very hall by people who were dues-paying members of St. Peter and Paul Church in December of 2005. So just so that that point is clear, okay? Just so that everybody understands that.
But you never answered my query. My query was that I was of the impression from the way you mentioned it the 2 times that you're of the opinion that the consistory decides whether or not we have a parish? Is that what you're saying?
The responsibility is always, that ball is always in the court of the consistory. And to be clear about it, we do have now, at least I haven't seen it, but supposedly we have at least a partial fulfillment of the request that was made by the consistory in October, and again, to be clear about it, yes, there was a request made that we have, and again, we're looking at a viable, sustainable, long-term resolution, because it's in nobody's best interest to go through this again in a year or 2, okay? But the first point there, as you know, was that the keys should be turned over to the you know, to the trustees, to the legally named trustees.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because
you see, there's an argument.
because okay, but please let me finish. Okay, because we did have another thing, and again, what's your first name?
Mike.
Mike, yeah, Mike, that's it. I like Mike's thing very much, where he says we have to go forward, but we have to be very cognizant of all of the aspects of this whole situation. And one thing that I find, again, very, it does trouble me, you know, is that I'm trying to understand what has gone on here. I live in Winnipeg. I cannot.
I would hope that after this meeting, that you've understood that not only have you not, you know, you don't see what's going on with us, but that we've had every reason to feel that the consistory was working against us. And there's been plenty of evidence to whether they intended to, but there's plenty of evidence that that was the fact. We look to the consistory and the church for our duhalist. And we are mature and growing up and try to take care of our business part of keeping a parish going. Good God, the people have done it for 45 plus years here. And there's every reason why we are suspicious and wondering as to what's gone on in the last year. And from what you're saying, you're telling us you're reading the letter of the law according to everything. Can't you understand why we feel the way we do about what's transpired in the last year?
It takes two sides to have.
I asked you a simple question. I don't need an
I'm trying to get an answer, and you keep interrupting, and I just, you know.
I asked you a simple question. I said,
I'm trying
can you
to answer,
understand
sir.
how we have gotten the impression that the consistory is working against us? And I just asked you, do you understand that there's a reason?
And I'm trying to answer you.
No, you were answering with a question, just yes or no. Do you understand that whether for reasons or not, why we feel
No.
that?
Excuse us.
Oche, I just want to ask a question, because what happened is, when you appointed these trustees have resigned from the church. And if you have appointed trustees that do not belong to the church, and these trustees that you have appointed, they have voted to close the church, is that really legal to do that? All these trustees that were appointed by the consistory, they have voted to close the church.
And also,
Just a second, before we go any further. Reverend is leading, and I can understand that.
Yes.
I would be in much the same position. But
This is very important meeting,
what
and also
we
for
have
all of
to
us
do-
that we can continue.
what we have to do now is, do we go ahead and try and organize something, or do we just leave it up to the...
Well, we have 54 members, we'll send the plan of what we're going to do.
This, we still didn't have the answer to where we go in our position. Could you?
In respect to you, if the parish is capable of existing, we'll do whatever it takes to help the parish continue to exist. But we need cooperation, we need goodwill, and we need, you know, a reasonable amount of parishioners who are willing to work and willing to donate to keep things open. So if I were to receive that plan on my desk in a letter, or Metropolitan were to receive it,
before the 1st of
we would of
February?
course,
Before the
we
1st
would
of
of
February?
course do whatever we could to enable that, okay?
Okay, now, who is responsible for, who is the executive in this church right now?
Okay. Right now,
The trustees.
Ollie's the person to deal with.
Okay, now, there is...
I'm sorry, Ollie.
Just a second. There is one thing. I feel that there is some misunderstanding in the consistory itself. Okay? Now, with the people here feeling that,
I understand you.
unless,
Yes,
unless we get a direct
Yes.
answer,
yes,
then we don't know where to go.
exactly.
Now, would you accept a letter from the people that are organized
Yeah,
here?
to be clear, that's not a problem as long as Ollie's on board. You know, you just want to make sure that everybody's all
Okay.
together.
Now, another thing about trustees. The consistory should have appointed trustees 3 years ago. Now, that wasn't done, as this gentleman suggested, that because the trustees that are now appointed had resigned from the church.
Okay, that is not correct.
Yes.
No, I have no record of anybody having resigned.
There's many things, and I think we should sit down and start
Yeah.
thrashing everything out,
Yeah.
but go ahead from
Yeah,
this point.
yeah.
And I would say that if you get a letter from the group that has organized here, would you accept that if we go through Ollie?
I think as long as it is, as long as it is, you know, if it's for real, if it reflects the reality that there are people who are willing to commit, because it's the commitment. That's what's needed.
It appears to me that there is commitment here now.
Well, God willing, God willing.
According to this meeting. Now, what we should do is get a letter, and you accept Ollie as a trustee. So we pass this, all these applications now that people want to join.
You know, I don't think it's necessarily an issue of, you know, having to fill out an application and all of that at this point. I think at this point, it's an issue of simply, do we have the people who are willing to commit?
Well,
That's the number one.
This is exactly what, if they sign up, then they are willing to, so if we...
But you have to understand also that when you join a parish, the application has to be received by the parish executive and by the priest, that they'll have to sign off on it, and we can't do that right now. So just so that
Well, this is what I'm saying, that if we go through the trustees, then that should be acceptable to you.
You do not have to have
Отже,
a priest.
я тільки хочу вас запитати одно. Чи ми маємо право тут мати службу? Прошу, з митрополитом. Нам митрополит казав, що ми маємо цілий рік, що ми можемо продовжувати. Але як ми мали тут священника проти нього, то чого ми...
Я не назначую священників.
То ми не треба, ми можемо, чи ми маємо попросити якийсь священик, що є на ретайрі, щоб міг прийти
Ні,
сюди?
ви не можете.
Чому ні?
Бо митрополит назначає священники, не люди.
Ну, part-time. Ми як поки ми ще...
Митрополит назначає всіх священників. Жодний священник не служить без благословення митрополита.
Ну, я розумію, але, скажімо, як є, скажімо, є священик, що є retired, що він може, нам же митрополит казав, що ми маємо право, як ми з ними сходимо.
Він має назначити священника.
Але як нема священика, то тоді може якийсь священик, що де є, що може, є retired і може прийти служити.
Митрополит назначає всіх священників. Жоден священник не може служити без благословення митрополита. Жоден священник не може служити у парафії, яка не його парафія, йому не доручена.
Я розумію, тільки я думаю, якщо там є якийсь священик, але як у нас нема священика, написано в листі, що нема designated священика, як у нас, ну,
Тоді треба просити у митрополита за священника. Тільки митрополит назначає священників.
Тільки митрополит.
Тільки митрополит.
І щоб він благословив, що ми маємо право
Обов'язково.
мати службу Божу.
Жодної служби Божої не може бути без благословення митрополита.
То я можу до нього подзвонити і запитати, як він скаже, що ми можемо мати священника, якийсь є retired, щоб його запросили сюди, щоб мав службу Божу, ми можемо
Це
мати.
все йде через
When was the
митрополита,
title
не через
signed,
мене.
Father Claudio? People want to know, when was the title signed over from this church now to the consistory? Because that's a legal issue. We'd like to know when it was signed. Because this morning? Fine.
Why?
Why? When you knew you were coming to see us?
Because
You had no,
because we are following standard operating
Okay.
procedures.
so we have to inform our lawyers, and also need an answer today, or Ollie would need an answer, who authorised the cutting of the phone, because this placing will not be insured. And I
Okay.
think that is your responsibility to tell Ms. Valverde who
Okay.
cut off the phone and to have it
Now,
reinstated.
if everybody will be quiet enough to actually give me a chance to make an answer, the phone was in service, as you know, and the alarm system was hooked up to the phone, obviously. When the locks were changed, none of the trustees were able to get in. Ollie, as previously the president of the parish council and then one of the trustees, was the person listed at the alarm company to respond whenever they got an alarm. They would call her. This was a very dangerous situation, and this was made known to the people who changed the locks for exactly the reason that you had mentioned, because if the alarm went off, she couldn't get into the church. So we had a very difficult situation. This was made known to the people who changed the locks. And then, because there was no access to church, to bills, to anything else, it was just decided that the phone...
No, but my question was, who
Just
was
a moment.
responsible
Just a minute. No, no.
for the, if
Please,
anything
Allah,
happened?
please.
If anything happened. Okay. Apologise.
Likewise, the premises have been insured since July, and the consistory has been paying for the insurance. But I thank you for raising the issue of the Milan Cup and all of that,
Well,
because
no.
now that makes it very clear that we have to be much more diligent as far as having anything happen here, because again, we do not have access to the church, and how can we accept responsibility for things that will happen in a facility that we do not have
No,
access
but
to?
my question
but-
was,
but-
no, excuse me,
but-
who would be responsible for the consistory if that had occurred? Like, who would take personal responsibility?
Forget it about that.
Well,
Right now, it's irrelevant.
all right.
Well, no,
I'm just
it
gonna-
actually
I'm
is
just gonna-
relevant, because
is
now
because of
what this
legal-
means is, in order to safeguard ourselves, like, you
That's
know,
right.
and, I mean, God forbid, but in order to safeguard ourselves, I mean, what do we have to do? Do we have to get a restraining order or what?
No.
I'm gonna have to think on this.
But we are,
I'll speak with our legal
Watch it.
counsel in Winnipeg.
Watch it.
And if we have to, you know, change the locks and post the notice and all of that stuff, I mean, we're gonna have to do that. This is just, you know, it's unfortunate, but I do not feel that there really is any great desire to cooperate. You know, forgive me.
watch
Well,
it.
no.
Чи перепрошую,
I thank you for everything you said, and I'm not talking about you.
я хочу, перепрошую, я перший хотів. Я тільки хотів вас запитати. Ви кажете, що Олі була на alarm system.
Yep.
То не була на Олі, то є той caretaker був на alarm system. Він є там записаний, я маю то на чорному і білому. Розумієте?
Now, I'm
No,
talking about July.
even before.
Ollie, were you on the list for the alarm system in July?
It was the caretaker was on the list to
But there's
when
usually
it
more
was
than one
kept.
person,
Okay,
yeah.
and then one more thing. I mean, the bank was closed. You know, was
No, the bank is open. The
No,
bank-
no.
No, checks bounced.
But we could not pay the
Exactly,
bills,
exactly.
and therefore, you know, the whole thing.
Exactly, because the bank,
And our membership money's in there. But we need it
the
back.
bank,
No,
the bank had a discrepancy between people who are trying to access the account and people who, and there was a question as to who actually had the right to access the account. We sent them our documentation, and they recognized it, and so the account is accessed. It is under the direction of the trustees, Ollie and Stephen Bill. And if there is, I understand that there at least was an attempt to deposit money there, and if any money was deposited, it will of course be refunded. But you know, we have to
But
do
that's
that. That
May-
was the
may
Can
I
I just
suggest
say one
that-
thing? I haven't spoken
Please,
at all.
yeah.
Це такі важні зборника.
Mhm.
Чому тільки маєте дві години для нас?
Because I have responsibilities on the island. And I
Але
have
там
to-
були казали цілий тиждень, а ми лише тут 2 години нам дали. Таке важне збори.
Now, okay, thank you. That's a very good point. But honestly, I had no idea what was going to happen. I wrote the letter to them saying that I would be glad to meet with them. I was not prepared for like a general meeting like this, and I was not informed that this would be the character of the meeting. So that's all I can say to that. If I had known, I could have made alternate arrangements, but I was able to get a flight at 4 o'clock, so I had to take that flight.
May I suggest something?
I know, I agree.
May I suggest that rather than go to legal, and we want to avoid this, just allow the group that is,
Mike, you
and
know,
let's go ahead and go from there.
I agree with you 100%, but as I said before earlier, we also have to bear in mind that we all have certain responsibilities, and we have to fulfill those responsibilities responsibly, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what that's all about, just so.
Прошу вас, я попрошу отця за кінцеву молитву.
Прошу вас, пане Голови. В ім'я Отця і Сина, Святого Духа, амінь. Господи, щиро дякуємо Тобі, що Ти благословив провести цей мітинг і позбав нас свого небесного благословення. Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Отче, поблагослови.
З нами Бог, Його благодаті, чоловіку людством, завжди, нині, повсякчас і на віки вічні. Амінь.
В ім'я Отця і Сина, і Святого Духа, в ім'я the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. В ім'я Отця і Сина, і Святого Духа.